Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Pull Up Trey podcast, the podcast wherein my dear friend Trey pulls up. That's right. Trevon Heath, Samson Folk, your favorite duo, one of Canada's favorite basketball podcasts. We're here to talk about maybe our most pessimistic episode so far. Everybody who listens to this podcast knows we have good times. We like to laugh. We take the optimistic spin on a lot of stuff. We focus on positive developmental trends. However, today, as a means to kind of decompress from everything that's been going super bad, we're actually going to talk about it. We have a whole bunch of notes that we've compiled about what the Raptors are bad at. We're going to talk about what they're bad at, why they're bad at it, and there'll be a little bit of positive spin probably towards the end of it. But we're having a full contextual "the Raptors are bad" conversation. Trey, how you feeling? How you doing?
I'm feeling good. For anyone who sees us on Twitter, this is the second time we are recording this podcast. So, I feel like there was somebody who was just like 9 o'clock in the morning. They're on their commute. They're like, "Oh, Trey and Samson."
Yeah, I think so. That's like that's a little bit of the like damn, we kind of let people down. We had
Yeah.
maybe 14 episodes in a row without a break, which is a cool thing. Uh but yeah, like thousands of people, be it viewing it or listening to it on podcast apps, thousands of people tune in. So somebody was looking for it and didn't find it. And to those people, our apologies. However, you get a little Saturday podcast. It is right back to the Thursday drops. No worries about it. Trey, you know what I talked about yesterday? I did the podcast with Will Lou, and we started
Yeah.
talking about ping pong. And I did not sell you very well. I said you were trash.
Jesus, bro. Jesus. The Asian
Bro,
people, bro, that's nuts.
bro. Yeah, the Chinese people, they think you're trash now. They're just like, nope, he can't hang. Uh, anyway, you know who else can't hang? The Raptors. This is a bad team. They have
Yeah.
won one game in the past calendar month. They just played a really fun game against the Cavs, and credit to them. And when you're listening to this, or after you listen to this, they're going to have a game against the Detroit Pistons, who are 19-19 right now. They'll have an opportunity to put a good win against like a decent Detroit team. However, they've been bad. They went from being, a defense that competes with like very little talent to a defense that has some talent but doesn't compete as hard. They went from a really great, one of the best transition defenses in the NBA to one of the worst. Their defense over the past 10 games has been the worst in the NBA by a mile. Their offense has slowed down in what they're able to create. They play slower on offense now. They don't turn teams over. They struggle rebounding certain parts of the floor. Like, bunch of stuff goes bad. There's schematic reasons why, and there's personnel reasons why. Trey, the first thing I want to talk about is that high as hell, league leading free throw rate. They put teams on the line at a higher frequency than anybody else in the NBA. I'm going to kick it to you. Your rough idea on why that is.
the the Raptors have predicated themselves on being like a high pickup team since day one. The This worked a lot better, obviously. Like when Davion was the starting point guard, he's one of the best in the NBA at moving his feet, keeping guys out of the paint. As his minutes has decreased, that's led to guys like Jamal Shed, Emmanuel Quickly now, who don't have the same necessary like defensive prowess. That leads to guys blowing by their initial defender, getting into the paint. Rotations tend to lead to threes and or fouls at the rim. The Raptors have an athleticism issue just on the perimeter. There's guys like RJ, Quickly, Grady, who's had a really hard time.
Oh, brother. It's just been bad.
They play very aggressive on defense. In means to create turnovers, force later shot clocks, really provide effort and compete. But NBA guards are very good, and to play at that level of intensity is also very hard in itself. And you can't recreate Davion Mitchell across 15 other guys. So I think from a schematic standpoint, they aren't playing to their strengths currently.
Yeah. And the thing is here too is like Davion is by far the best at doing this.
Yeah.
But also, Davion hasn't been so lights out elsewhere that you just have to keep him on the floor. There are considerations like we've all been intrigued and very happy with how Jacoby has responded to on ball assignments and off ball assignments. Jacoby, it's been fun. He's been better than people expected, but he's not close to Davion. Jamal is not close to Davion. Nobody there is close to Davion. Even Scottie, when he's being asked to pick up really high pickup points, Scottie is a tremendous defender. However, these high pickup points on guards is not his strength. And if Scottie's out front, then that means that he's not at the back either. Like the Raptors are playing a scheme, that high pickup point, that would rely on super, super strong point of attack defenders. And there was a better correlation when Davion was obviously around. And
We saw it yesterday.
yeah,
Darius Garland was facing that continually. They tried to put Scottie on him, and as Scottie was the high pickup man, that means Jared Allen and Evan Mobley are gonna have a very easy time in the paint. So it's like a catch 22. Like it's a personnel issue and playing conservative, which is probably what I wanted fairly early in the season. Seems like it's the way to go, but that also um, I think you probably have better insight. It probably allows for guys to be hidden and not show their level of compete that Darko's like been quoted and wanted from these young guys all year.
yeah, this is the interesting aspect of it is like, because again, the Raptors were third in free throw rate last year. This year, they're 30th. And like, part of that is having OG and Pascal, both low foul defenders, both like, OG is aggressive and conservative at the same time because he's that good. Pascal became quite a conservative, like keep the ball in front, not a lot of turnover style of defender. But a lot of the year they had this team similar and they didn't foul very much. They were more conservative and they tried to keep the ball out front and they tried to like keep teams out of the paint. Now they aren't able to. And the reason why they do this is because a guy like Davion, if you put him out front, he can weak players. He can disrupt every single action that a team is going to run. And he can put, just by himself, the most important guy, the MIG, that the Raptors have been kind of championing. He can put like an offense in fits and starts immediately. It's a very high ask. Like it's very difficult to ask teams to do that. Another thing that happens, right, is all of this kind of meshes together, and we'll talk about it at the end. Why? I mean, I guess why the Raptors are doing this. Also, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Forgot to do that. We did it in the first recording right away. This time it took 8 minutes, but hey, them's the breaks. Let's talk about the rebounding. All of this stuff goes together, but I'll start with the rebounding. The Raptors have a relative lack of size. Scottie Barnes is a tremendous rebounder for his size and for his position. The Raptors are way better at grabbing their own defensive rebounds when he's on the court. The on-offs are massive. Same thing with Jakob Poeltl and former Raptor, recently released Bruno Fernando. All these guys have these huge positive swings. When they're on the floor, the Raptors rebound the ball better. However, you can't keep everybody on the floor at all the same times. Jonathan Mobo is in the first percentile as far as like defensive rebounding swings. Mobo played awesome defense for stretches and times, but he was getting killed on the glass. Kelly Olynyk gets killed on the glass. Chris Boucher, as much as he's been so fun lately, he gets killed on the glass. The Raptors don't have the size up front to contend, and they don't have guys like a Derek White or a Dyson Daniels or one of those like really beefy two
Yeah.
guards who comes and gets in the mix and helps lock that stuff down. I mean, RJ's done a decent job of grabbing 6 boards a game roughly, but not a large percentage of his are contested rebounds. The Raptors aren't able to go and get themselves into the mix. What does this do? It means they give up second opportunities. It means that other teams are hitting threes after the kickout. It means that big men are getting layups after the board. The Raptors, this one is less so scheme. This seems more so personnel that's motivating this. But they are bottom 5 in the NBA in
Yeah.
closing out possessions defensively. What are you seeing there?
It shows in in construction. Backup center has been probably outside of point guard because Quickly's been gone for I guess it was like 3 months. Insane. Um,
Yeah, like if you combine, he's played what, like 7, 8 games now. He's
yeah,
like 30 games he's missed roughly.
holy. The Raptors have no backup center on the roster, even to this day, that provides like strong NBA minutes. Like Kelly Olynyk ideally is your 4, and he's struggled with NBA foot speed since he's been back in the lineup. It's almost like Yabusele had like that Space Jam ball. He took all of his ability in that game, but it is what it is. Mobo early in the season like helped so much defensively because he was able to switch. but bless his heart, like he just doesn't have the requisite size to
Mhm.
face guys like Jokic or Jared Allen, for example. When teams like the Cavaliers have two bigs that really wreak havoc and are able to get into the paint, the Raptors don't have the size to truly compete. And similar to what you said, like on the perimeter, they're tiny, like in terms of actual physicality, like a quickly Grady backcourt, while Grady probably makes up a lot of that in like willingness to like get dirty and scrappy. And he like in college, he was a great rebounder. It's hard to make up that physicality in the game. You're just facing grown men. And
Yeah.
that's something that'll come in time, I think. But
They're both tall relative to their positions, but they're both
yeah,
they're slight.
they're
Like,
wiry. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Even, like, Jamal looks kind of fire hydrant-y, but he isn't. Davion looks kind of fire hydrant-y, but these guys, the Raptors' backcourt does not throw weight. If
No.
anybody does, it's Davion, but Davion does not he's not a huge, like, rebounding guard. He's very short. Jamal, very short. The guys who are taller, like Emmanuel and Grady, they're very slim. The Raptors just they have as far as, like, size, Jakob is maybe a little bit bigger than the average center. Maybe he's about average. Scottie is a great beast of a man. What if you play him at the 3, he's insanely huge. If you play him at the 4, he's maybe, like, a little bit undersized, but he's extremely strong and he can hang
Yeah.
in. Otherwise, and the guys they bring in, Kelly's not gonna do it. Mobo's not gonna do it. Boucher's not gonna do it. Like, Jacoby has been fun chasing down rebounds, but as far as, like, putting a body on somebody, the Raptors just don't have that ability to win the physical aspect of things. RJ does okay, but he's not
Yeah.
swinging anything for you.
So yeah, it's tough. And then if you're not going to be a good rebounding team, it makes it so hard to get stops. Um, I think that's also a large reason why they aren't allowing for misses. So it's harder to get into offense. It's harder to become a transition offense when you aren't getting stops. Teams are getting offensive rebounds at such a high clip. The amount of effort that they're putting into the initial possession to get a stop is led into an offensive rebound, and the defense is completely scrambled because they're allowing so many drives all of the time. Um, I think this is one of those things that needs to be addressed, like either whether that's at the deadline or in the summer, like with the trade.
Yep.
It's the most one of the most glaring things that you see with the team is that they have a very hard time with physicality, which is why opening night the Cavs blow them out and put
That's
us
why
in
the
like
that's why
disarray.
the hamstrung Magic also gave the business to them.
Yeah,
The
they
Mag
killed him
the
with his
Magic, they bring it to you. Even though Jalen Suggs goes out, even though Powell and Franz and those guys are bullies, like real big time bullies. Scottie's a bully, so are Franz and Powell. Everybody's missing. They still had Goga in there. They still had their slew of guys, and guys like De Silva and Houston are like, I'm gonna bring the physicality, and they won that way.
no bread, no water, just beef.
Um, we'll take this opportunity to talk about kind of like the motivation because we talked about two things: the schematics, which that's a coach thing. I don't know how much Darko has a conversation with Masai and Co. or and Bobby about like what scheme they play. I think that's up to Darko. You can change the scheme they're running. However, Darko has no recourse to changing that defensive
Yeah.
rebounding equation. He did prior with Bruno Fernando, but also there is expectation and pressure to look elsewhere on the roster. Bruno, again, Darko does not make the decision whether Bruno stays on the team or not. Masai and Bobby do. Bruno got cut. If that tells you why maybe there was a decision from high up in collaboration with the coach, why Bruno wasn't involved, that might make sense, right? Now, why do you think the Raptors play this high pickup point style? Why do you think they want to do this? Like, let's think about from their perspective, what's the advantage here?
One, like it forces your gun, it forces develop in the way that your young guys have to compete. They have to fight over screens. They have to face the best guards in the
I'd
NBA and pick
rather
them up.
have to turn a guy down than have to turn them up, brother. One of those is easier than the other.
So you get a possession where Jacoby is going against Jalen Brunson for 10 possessions, and that's really good development for him. And you can see what he can do within those possessions instead of them being a very conservative drop team that allows teams to shoot mid-range jumpers. So I understand it from that perspective, but then you're also giving up a lot of points within with the way that you're playing. And there's a clear, obvious caveat. If when you look at it, like the Raptors should have one of the best in terms of protecting the rim from their front court, at least from their bigs, if Scottie is considered a big.
That's yeah,
And
that's
they're
a good point.
and they're not leaning into that standpoint. So I'm not gonna say that they're tanking per se, but they're clearly utilizing like their means of like development and seeing those guys within more strenuous possessions than having an effective defense. So if I were to have a criticism of Darko, that'd probably be one of the first things mentioned is that last year, Scotty, in terms of like creating havoc, in terms of protecting the rim, was getting to the peak that we thought he was going to.
Three
And
stocks a game, pretty gnarly.
which is insane. He hasn't had that same force just because the Raptors play far more aggressive. He's picking up guys a lot higher too, and they're not leading into their strengths. So
Well, that was,
I
to go back to that thing, like,
yeah,
that is some of that is scheme, and we'll talk about it, but some of that's personnel too, because one of the interesting things about the early start of last season is obviously OG Anunoby is there, but in the way that the Raptors were playing like a lot of high-low, north-south passing, and Scottie started shooting a lot more catch and shoot threes above the break, and it carved out room. Like that was Scottie being like, you know what, I'm going to make room for Pascal offensively. Pascal played the perimeter, and Scottie played the low man, and so it puts Scottie in a super strong position where Pascal and Dennis and OG are out up top, and Scottie gets to be this big backline sweeper. Under no circumstance do RJ, Grady, and Emmanuel or whoever come close to representing like what Pascal, OG, and even Dennis or whoever was able to provide there. Yeah, like it creates a personnel change, but there's scheme stuff too.
again, you just go to their physicality. You see games like they're playing OG Anunoby. Even when you're in your shell and Grady Dick is in front of him, he's separating him from the court. And the Raptors, they I just think personally, like Scotty is like their wrecking ball, especially defensively.
hmm
You saw him raise the tides of what they had previously, like earlier in the year. I think allowing him to be that roamer, be the backline sweeper as they are weaking guys and allowing him to create steals, block shots, get them into transition would bode so much more for them offensively because like now that they're not rebounding the ball well, teams are scoring a lot. They're facing so much more set defenses, and that puts a lot of stress on one Scotty and just like everyone around them.
Yeah. So also the Raptors want to create turnovers
Yeah,
because for as long as this podcast has existed, the Raptors have struggled in the half court offense big time, and they have looked
yeah,
to subsidize that by running out in transition. The Raptors do a pretty good job of like grab and go after the rebound if they can get it to push in transition, but a lot of teams love to create turnovers to run in transition to ease things up on their offense as far as how much they have to create. They don't do that this season. And the interesting thing too is that like if you're addressing this defense as it was just on its own merits this season, not thinking about the future, you're saying that it's wrong. Like I look at this and I say this is wrong. When they announced it, I was like, I don't know if this makes a bunch of sense. And even I still have to talk to Darko a little bit because, and for anybody who's listening closely, this is a really funny thing. Before the Nets game, I talked to Darko about what Emmanuel quickly can add. And he said, well, he's going to force a higher pickup point, and that's going to give us more room to run things and it's going to create opportunities for us on offense. And in my head, I was like, okay, I'm not going to get into this back and forth right now. This will be a one-on-one conversation. Is a higher pickup point a good thing for the offense then? And if so,
yeah,
why have you been a top 5 high pickup point defense all season, right? But the truth is that if you have somebody who's really good at it, it can be a strength. If it's Keon Johnson and Beekman, then the Nets get absolutely obliterated, right?
yeah,
So there's another thing here too. The and this is a team I cover a little bit, the Pacers. I at the end of the two when I talked to Rick Carlisle in the 2022-23 season, and we were talking about like new defensive schematics and what the next step is. He told me, he was like, I think it's like guarding your man. And I thought that was wrong, obviously. But I'm not going
Yeah.
to go to war with Rick. I care about what he thinks, and I want that quote. Um, but coaches are politicians a little bit too. And coaches have to think about more than just like what's the most efficient. They have to try and develop other aspects of their team.
Mhm.
So the following season, 23-24, the Pacers were the lowest frequency help team in the whole league. So when Rick was saying that, he was saying, we don't guard enough. I want to leave guys on an island and make them guard. Nobody's coming to save you. It was a cultural defensive thing that they had. Then they made an Eastern Conference Finals run, which was assisted by injuries, of course, but also they made changes defensively so it wasn't as much guard your yard. There was more rotation. In the middle of this season, as they become one of the hottest teams in the NBA, they're finally healthy again. Andrew Nemhard is back, yes, to provide higher pickup points, but to assist those higher pickup points, the Pacers are also nexting and peeling far more often, which means that he has that high pickup point, Andrew Nemhard, but if he gets beat, he rotates to the next man and somebody lower in the defense rotates over to stop ball. It's a mixing and melding of the two things. That took a year and a half, 2 years to create that cultural identity. And the Pacers, like recently, they've been a top half of the league defense, but not over the full season. It's like coaches have to think a lot about the future.
Mhm.
And even if the Raptors are doing this now, it doesn't necessarily mean they'll be doing it in the future, which is why, on its merits, I say this is the wrong defense. But on the other hand, I don't know what Darko has planned for this roster. I don't know what expectations he has for that to switch, but I do know he's trying to get these guys like put your ass on the line and guard. And that has waxed and waned.
Yeah, it makes sense. And like you see even see some intentionality like with the shed pick and with the Davion trade. There's like two guys that embody in theory embody what playing that type of defense would make sense or just building a culture of having a level of compete. Jamal still does have that level of compete. It just hasn't translated into the NBA. It's
Competing a
translated
little
to
too
a
hard. you know.
he's a grabber. It's translated into fouls, and like Jacoby is very pesky as well. Scottie, like when engaged, is very pesky as well. Like building within that culture and having a defense that's really aggressive and can create turnovers and create transition baskets makes a lot of sense. And when you're thinking of the there's a good chance the large majority of this roster will not be together within the next 2 or 3 years. You're trying to build a culture within those core members of the team that are going to be here to have that fight and have that compete when playing defense. So I do see that perspective also.
There's also there's an interesting thing here too, is like Jamal Shed is a great example of Jamal Shed playing that high pickup point pesky defense where they create the line of scrimmage in Houston. That is supported by the big man, whereas Jakob is a drop big and he's playing
Mhm.
most of the defensive possessions. The Raptors, when Jonathan Mobo is on the floor, they're able to keep teams away from the rim more often. They're able to keep teams from shooting threes more often, and teams have to shoot more mid range jumpers against the Raptors because Mobo is the type of big who supports that defense. There is something else we can talk about, how the Raptors are when they don't force a lot of misses, because they don't. They're bottom six in effective field goal percentage in the NBA. They allow a lot of looks at the rim. They allow a lot of corner triples. They have the high pickup points. They play from behind in rotation. Teams are shooting top 10 at the rim against the Raptors, and they're shooting like extremely well from the corners, 67% at the rim, 40% from downtown. They struggle to guard ball handlers. We've talked about this like writ large, but I'm going to use the pick and roll as like a quick example. I'll go deep on it. But firstly, I'll ask you, Trey, like, what do you think their limitations are in changing shot diets and also like creating or making shots more difficult? Why you think there's a limitation there?
There's like an athleticism issue. Like there isn't there they aren't able to create. There is no rim deterrence within their scoring starting five. Whereas like the 21 22 team, like even though they didn't have a big, they were able to deter guys from the rim and force teams to shoot like the most inefficient shots. Whereas the Raptors, they're giving up blow bys that create rotations. And right now, like from like a backline side, the only person you trust to really execute that and like create some chaos is probably Scottie. Jakob, who operates well in drop defense, doesn't necessarily have the foot speed that you would want to fuck up a play and create chaos. So you're seeing guys. There's an open corner usually open. Josh Hart has Scottie Barnes on his hip, and Jakob Pertl has to decide between whether he's going to give up an open three or a shot at the rim. So offenses are getting the most efficient shots right now. Like Daryl Morey is like shedding tears seeing people play the Raptors currently, and I think a lot of that can be like obviously with scheme, but there's there there is a decision they do have to make like a at some point if both Grady and Quickly can't play defense together. It makes it significantly harder for them to build as a team and build as a unit because you're not building into you're going to have some of the most elite offensive units in order for them to stay together. And that's a really high plane for all of them to hit, and they all need to hit a ceiling, which is tough.
Yeah. The Kings keep running into that. They
Yeah,
built an
100%.
offensive team that it was a bunch of really fun offensive players who they played with such harmony offensively that you're like, okay, this works, let's justify it. But then when things got a little bit tougher, they're like, okay, we need to be able to pivot. Can we ask these guys to pick it up a little bit more on that end? And they're realizing, like, we probably didn't strike the perfect balance here. And they have to retool. And their coach just got fired too after he won Coach of the Year 2023. So the last time the Raptors were in the top half of keeping teams away from the rim was 2021-22, the year where the Raptors really dove into democratic rim protection. That means the Raptors, they pulled strong side, they pulled weak side, they rotated to the rim like three guys at a time. And that was when they didn't have a center. They
Yep.
didn't have a center, and they still managed to keep teams away from the rim. Every year since then, they have been very bad at it, except for last year. And this is why it's interesting because Darko has played two radically different defensive schemes. The year when he got here, the Raptors were very conservative, very, very conservative. They were 16th in the NBA at keeping teams away from the rim. They completely shrunk after being last, second last, and this year, third last in frequency of corner threes. Like the Raptors, they've allowed the most corner threes of any team over the past like 9 years in totality. They just allow corner threes.
Mm.
Last year they didn't. The Raptors didn't allow a bunch last year, and they didn't allow a bunch at the rim last year. They did give up a lot of threes, but they've changed it completely. And I'll focus in on the pick and roll aspect that I said I would. Here's the thing. Jakob Pertl is not 25. He's not 26. He isn't like super fleet of foot anymore. He's still a good defender, of course, but
Mm.
something happens when you have to play drop defense, and they do. You're not going to have Jakob do anything more. If you want him to hedge sometimes, fine, but like that's not his strength. The Raptors aren't good at digs. Like a guy like Grady, not good at digs. Guys like Jacoby, maybe he will be in the future. RJ, RJ doesn't want to dig. RJ has one of the lowest like steal percentages of any like high volume player in the NBA over the past however many years. RJ wants to like stay at home constantly. Scottie is not in a position to dig very often, although he's got quite a few steals this year. Basically, what I mean to say is like the Raptors aren't getting help at the top of the defense from the dig man. They also are not getting that much like backside rotation because Jakob is playing pick and roll. The Raptors aren't playing good defense at the point of attack. They get caught on the screen. They're constantly being put in 2-on-1 situations, constantly. So, what is Jakob's tendency? Their number one big. His tendency is to take away the roll man. He wants to stay at home and have a light contest on the pick and roll ball handler, and he needs the trailing guard to crack down on the big if there's like a scoop, pass around the rotating Jakob. Here's the thing. That trail man is not a lot of times affecting the roll man, and Jakob isn't a lot of times affecting the ball handler. This means that the Raptors struggle both at stopping roll men, both at stopping ball handlers. And get this, if they tag the roll man from the weak side corner, they're also bad at stopping the sprayed pass to the corner three. If you play a more conservative defense, you don't have to play catch up as often. And the only above average defender the Raptors have per synergy guarding the pick and roll is who else? Davion Mitchell. So, and like it keeps coming up that the Raptors defense hinges on Davion. And,
Yeah.
and like, of course, it hinges on Jakob and it hinges on Scottie. Like, Davion isn't the best defender on the team, but he's the best at executing this scheme that they run. It's a little bit incongruent, right? And so when the Raptors are putting so much pressure on that type of play, and there's like one guy who can execute it, it doesn't seem like a road to success or a path to success. Not currently. What I want to ask you now, before we get into the offensive side of the ball, and we get to talk about Scottie a lot in this way, in interesting and fun ways. Um, do you want this defense to be around currently and in the future? Like, how do you feel?
No. You I think like even like the Bucks are a really good example. They have Scottie's not Giannis. I'm not hearing to say that, but their own star had vocalized that they wanted to play a more aggressive style. He wanted to pick up guys and play a similar type of style of like defense. That he's another guy, really high hips, very long. That doesn't bode well for like his strengths.
Yeah, he
He's
actually sucks at isolation defense.
he gets cooked. And like Scotty's probably better at picking up he has a couple good possessions on Garland. You want him to be in the fuck up the play position. You want him to be roaming. You want him to utilize his instincts and feel, which I think are his best talents, in order to create chaos and create turnovers. And if you're going to invest, they already have invested in guys who aren't that athletic and aren't that physical. So they need to allow their rim protection to speak for their defense. So if they can weak their defender, allow guys to come into Jakob Pertl. He's since Utah, he's been one of the best rim protectors possible.
Well, they
That is a
had the guy who beat his block record, and they shunted him from the roster. Brandon Carl. He did it with an extra year, but
yeah. And Scottie, who last year looked like he's going to become an All NBA defender. It's to this year, there's still glimpses of that, obviously.
I think it's still in the cards. You
Yeah,
probably feel the same way. Yeah.
yeah, 100%. Let those guys be the strength of your defense. Do not rely on Jamal Shed. Bless his soul. He had a really good game yesterday. Thank God. To lose tons of minutes because you're asking him to guard Jalen Brunson 30 feet out. He simply cannot. Jalen Brunson is amazing. Darius Garland, when you play like this, will score 40 points on you.
Yeah.
Just go into the strength of what you have on the roster.
So I'll provide two. I think, of course, it's very nuanced. These two things aren't the answers fully, but I'll provide the pessimistic and optimistic view.
Yeah.
So the pessimistic view, Darko has it wrong. Darko is failing as a coach to utilize the defensive talents on his roster. He's putting his players in positions where they don't win, and he's doing this because he's not a good enough coach to see what works, and he isn't able to create game plans that succeed. And that's all happening. There's nothing else feeding into that. That's like,
Yeah.
I think that's maybe like a median view of him as a coach.
Yeah,
Like,
probably.
because the team is really bad. Like we've been talking about this whole podcast, the team is not good, and they should be better. I think that's true. They should be better than they are,
Agreed.
even with all of you take into account all the injuries and all that kind of stuff. That's one view. The second view, and whoever wants to choose whatever, again, whoever you want as your coach, it doesn't matter. It's disagreeing about basketball is the coolest possible thing to disagree about. It doesn't matter. We disagree about Jason Tatum all the time. And so The second option is that the Raptors didn't get a lot of guys on their team, or a handful of their important guys, did not come via a draft. These guys had different things taught to them. These guys come with already developed skills. They're looking to develop themselves still, but they have a large part of their game involved. You have Emmanuel Quickly, who has an extremely overrated reputation as a defender. And that was like, it seemed easy for me to see at the time, but really it was evident, as the Raptors played games. And again, it's a bad team. Guys never give it their all on bad teams. Winning Juju is a big deal, but you also have RJ Barrett. You have those two guys who now make like almost $60 million combined. They're not strong defenders.
Yeah.
This Raptors team, do we think, are saying like it's a cultural reset? We need dogs at the point of attack. We're going to try and do that. Do you think that there's a sense of what Indiana was trying to do? And Indiana eventually decided it didn't work. They said, okay, Tyrese Halliburton cannot do this. We're going to play a lot of zone where he's in the corner and we have to protect him. They gave up on it to some degree. Um, Maybe the Raptors are going through a thing where they're trying to instill this like rugged pickup point doggedness in their new guys, and they're looking at Emmanuel Quickly. They're looking at RJ Barrett and saying, "You'll get paid, of course, but we want to know if you actually stick around with Scottie." And this is a year and a defense where if you got it in you, you can show, you can provide that extra effort, and it can be a launching off point. That's the more optimistic view. Again, it doesn't have to be true.
Yeah.
Choose what you want, but there are reasons culturally to choose this. However, and again, the goal of the game is to win. For the coach,
Under
it should be, and for the players. And they're losing a lot. The team is obviously built in a funky way. It doesn't fit very well together. They had to trade out of the Pascal OG situation, and they took their best deals, but that doesn't mean that the team is built perfectly.
Yeah.
This is a situation we're in.
Yeah. I just don't see a world where Darko is looking at his box score. The Raptors have tons of people who are paid way more money than I probably can even fathom.
I thought you were gonna
And
say way more than I probably am. Like I was like, oh, you're gonna be in the same tax bracket.
oh, and say like Jamal Shed is playing well right now. Let's reward him with more minutes, for example. There, I'm 1,000% positive they're well aware of their defensive struggles and how that scheme has reflected defensively. I think instilling like competitiveness and peskiness at the point of attack is important for guys like Grady, important for guys like Jacoby, who both show tons of effort at the bare minimum. It's much harder to get that defensive effort from guys that you've traded for, like RJ, who probably if he was like even neutral on defense would like change the course of his career. But
Yeah,
having guys like Davion, even Jamal, who competes really hard, Bruce Brown, it creates a culture and it creates a standpoint for a guy like Jacoby and Grady, who you hope are here and a part of the solution once the Raptors are good, to have those reps of them competing very hard. Because whether or not they've already paid quickly, they've already played RJ. I think those two guys are less of a guarantee to be on the team long term. And constructing around those guys, I think the idea is constructing around Scottie. And if you want a team that can play well at the point of attack while he's being a dervish and going in and out and weaving through the structure and shell of the defense, you want those guys to get reps. So I think it's important for Jacoby, it's important for Grady to get those reps. And Grady's getting punished every single night, like playing this way. But
yeah.
in a year or two, that's going to be beneficial for him.
I think the Grady stuff is like his defense has progressively gotten worse. Like
Yeah.
we'll talk about Grady at the end of the podcast because again, we've done the Grady check in when it was fun. We got to do the Grady check in when it's not fun at all. But whether or not he's been bad, He puts it out there, man. Like
Yeah,
he throws his body at whatever's happening defensively. And to your point, like I love that you brought up the Bucks was that the Bucks were a high pickup point team.
yeah,
And who was waiting? Giannis and Brook Lopez, and they won a championship. The difference being Chris Middleton was on the wing, and it was a combination of like between Eric Bledsoe, Wesley Matthews, Drew Holiday. These are some of truly the best like lock and trail defenders in the NBA. Whether it's on a pick and roll possession or coming off of a pin down, these guys are hounds like barking at your heels as you go towards Brook Lopez and Giannis. If I suspect the Raptors had defenders at the point of attack of that quality, where it gets to be Jakob at the rim, Scottie in weight as well, then this makes sense. This type of scheme can make sense.
yeah,
However, for this personnel, it makes very little sense. It makes very little sense for the personnel to feature the guy who is strongest in it is the guy who got salary dumped for 2 second-round picks and the 45th overall pick. There are obviously other motivators here, but we don't know them exactly. And again, I would not begrudge any fan for being upset because are you supposed to be as a fan thinking about like what we've talked about? No. Who cares? It's like
yeah.
with the Blue Jays. It's like I don't care. Shut up and give Vlad money. I don't care. Give him the
Man,
money. Like
two
I want to
two
see.
shits about your evaluation,
Yeah,
please.
get get good players. Be good. Like, I'm the brilliant fan who's like, well, actually, this, and that. No, I watched the game on the TV. They suck ass. Like, it's not fun. You and I, we get paid a little bit to think about this and to analyze, so we do. But like, as a fan, be better,
Yeah,
play better. Easy
I would
peasy.
like even me. I wasn't watching Darius Garland's buckets. Like this is great development right here. I'm glad they're staying in it. It's like whoa, so it's
That's
tough.
well, that's yeah. That was like Will when I do the podcast with him, he was overjoyed that we got a good game.
Yeah,
Like
it's
he's
been a
like,
while.
"Yep, I'm just so happy it mattered." And like it's the fact that the Raptors just aren't in games lately is a huge problem because again, it's not just like, "Hey, build the best team, suck ass for forever." It's an entertainment product. You
Yep.
got to be in it, man, at least a little bit. And I know they take advantage and take for granted how great Toronto fans are. They show up. I'm shocked, man. I'm shocked when I go to that building and there's as many people in it. It's not a super great crowd right now, but there's people there.
Yeah.
They sold the tickets. I just let's talk offense. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So, there's one thing, a fun thing. The Raptors are one of the best teams as far as like after timeout plays in the NBA. There's a fun thing for you. When Darko gets his chance to like work the pen, it typically goes well. And that's great. He draws up good plays. That's nice to see. Here's the thing. By location data, the Raptors are one of the best teams in the league at taking quote unquote good shots. They take a lot of corner threes. They shoot a lot at the rim. They're second in the NBA in rim frequency. Everyone should love shooting at the rim.
Yeah.
That's great. Here's the thing though, and I'll give you all the numbers and then you go nuts, sir. 7 rotation players are above average mid-range shooters. Now that doesn't mean they're dynamic mid-range shooters. It doesn't mean anything like that. I mean, Grady and Scottie have both been pretty fun this season in that regard, but they have 7 guys who, in their volume, are shooting above average relative to their roles and their positions. They have 2, count it, 2 on their roster of 18 guys, or I guess it's 17 now without Bruno, or I guess Eugene just signed the 10-day. Anyway, they have 18 guys. 2 are above average rim finishers. 2 on the team. That's where they take the most shots. This is where they do their most shooting, and they're terrible there. Scottie is an elite finisher. This isn't news to anybody. Scottie's an elite finisher. His 2-point percentage has gone up this year. He's up to 56% on twos. He's shooting well above 70% at the rim. Hell yeah, Scottie. Killing it at the rim. Ochai has been okay at the rim. But here's the thing. Ochai's doing it mostly in transition. So in the half court, functionally, The Raptors have a Scottie Barnes. And the crazy thing is Jakob, relative to centers and bigs this year, is merely average as a finisher. They
That's
aren't
insane.
getting they and he's been awesome in the short mid-range, but, like, guess who is one of their above average mid-range shooters this year? Jakob. At the rim, though, he's not been, like, super lights out relative to his peers. That means they have one guy giving you surplus value at the rim on the whole team, Scottie Barnes. Here's the funny thing, Scottie's rim frequency this year is shrinking. They have one guy who's really good at the rim, and he's taking less shots than ever at the rim because he's being forced to create with his handle. He's working on developing other parts of his game. RJ has this massive frequency at the rim. He's having a bad year finishing. This is what's happening. The Raptors shoot a lot at the rim. They basically have Scottie who can finish there. And like of course Jakob can finish there, but he's not been elite. And they have basically no above average three-point shooters. They are bottom 10 in three-point percentage in the NBA. So, to paint the picture without all my stupid babbling on, the quick thing, the Raptors shoot in really great places. Their players just don't make shots. The floor
We
is
are
yours,
ass.
Devon.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, I think like you just outlined like one of the reasons why like I've been a Darko defender. Like the way that they play and the intentionality of it is in the ways that ideally lead to winning and winning in a big way. They create really good shots for their team. I think the issue that they're having offensively is they don't have that a driver or engine of the offense that allows guys to get better looks in ways that can create easy looks at the rim. Although RJ's getting there, it's usually him barreling in between and having a much harder path. Scottie is being asked to like be their engine while he's even trying to figure out like his game currently. I love the Scottie Elijah stuff. I love the Scottie Leonard stuff within the mid range. I think that's been really fun, and
Wait, are
I
you
think
the
now
Scotty Kawhi comp you're doing?
there's a couple
No,
jumpers there.
I'm not fighting it. I'm just saying like that is Pascal got it a little bit.
Yeah,
OG got it big
OG
time.
for a long time.
Every good wing in Toronto eventually gets the Kawhi comp, it seems. There you go. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, and he's hitting it at a good clip. I think where they're having issues is that one, he doesn't necessarily have the reps yet to play make from those spots. You can tell once he's getting into those moves, those are things that he's been working on this summer, taking 1,000 shots doing. And two, the defense has no issues with him actually taking the shot. Their shell doesn't break, although second half he was punishing Evan Mobley from those spots.
5 of 7 from the field.
But Jared Allen wasn't moving at all and staying within his shell of it in the defense, and that creates fewer opportunities for him to play make, which I think is his true gift and best skill, and also for the other guys around him, much more difficult looks because the Cavs aren't rotating around. In the ideal essence, you want Scotty stuff to where he did towards the end of the game, getting deep catches, running early and barreling people into the paint and getting free throws that way and being the plus finisher that he really is. The tough point is the Raptors haven't had a guard or perimeter player that can be that engine while he's doing all of those things in an ancillary level. He's being asked to do things in a way that you, and some of it is probably how he wants to play as well. That like a Luka Doncic is asked to play. Everyone's spread out. He's trying to score and navigate and understand what he needs to do to score, but he doesn't have the same handle as a guy with such a high plane and ceiling needs, and isn't getting to the rim with his burst enough to justify teams rotating. So it's become a much more difficult situation, and I don't think it's a bad thing. Experimentation is the reason why you rebuild, but I think
So
it's become abundantly clear there needs to be a guard or a driver within the offense that can force teams to rotate and allow him to be that barreling guy, play finisher that can score and utilize that mid range as a counter when he does get those possessions against a weaker guy like Mobley.
The Cavs game was actually like a really great little example of it.
Yeah.
You really well put when you say like he's getting to the shots, he's scoring tough shots.
Those are
Like
tough buckets too.
you watch it and you're like, damn, like
Yeah.
that's really nice. It's not easy to boogie on Evan Mobley, and the truth is like Scottie didn't boogie on him. Mobley stayed in front the whole time, but Scottie's leaning back and hitting really difficult shots over top. But that possession will never ever get a defense to double.
Yeah.
He doesn't get deep enough for it to double. And the defense probably looks at like the true shooting percentage, the expected outcomes. They're like, if this is the best shot the Raptors get on this possession, we're happy with it. This is kind of similar to how we talked about the defense is like, are they putting in reps now for what comes later? Scottie evidently is.
Yeah.
If you had said when Pascal got traded that Scottie over the next like 45, 50 games would average less points per game than he did next to Pascal, I think everybody would have said like, no, that's ridiculous. And especially if you told them his usage percentage is going to go up like 4 or 5%, everybody would have said, no, he's probably getting close to like 24, 25 points per game. And
Yeah.
he's scored less, like 20 points per game, roughly, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more since Pascal left. But his shots have gotten tougher. And
Mhm.
joining him with that tougher shot diet, taking things on as the first option, is a huge spike in his turnover percentage and like a small uptick in his assist percentage. He's missed more shots, he's turned the ball over more, but these are the reps that create him being a more impervious scorer to defensive changes in the future. You can't like when you look at what Scottie's doing now, where like 65, 70% of his shot diet is like jumpers. You look at that guy and you say, really? But the thing is, he's shown what he can do otherwise. He's shown
Yeah.
like how, man, that run he had to start his third year that put him in an all-star game was really, really special. And it looks like it was fueled a little bit by maybe a not so true uptick in 3-point efficiency,
Yeah.
but he was really good scoring around guys and to the tune of like 21 and a half points per game, almost 22. He's doing something more difficult now. And so all this to say, the Raptors offense, having Scottie, their best finisher, play farther away from the rim, having Scottie, who isn't their best dribbler, having him initiate so many plays. The Raptors are actively making their offense worse this year to make Scottie a better player in the future. Like they
Yeah.
could try and maximize Scottie, quote unquote maximize. It would look different. Scottie's not
Mhm.
being maximized. He is, however, developing. And when your best player is not maximizing your team, this is kind of what it looks like. Because if Scottie was like far and away a dominant presence, he would uplift the team by a crazy amount. That was what we talked about before the season. Like, if the Raptors don't tank, it's probably good because it means that Scottie is like closer to generational than it is just like a good all-star slash NBA all
Yeah.
NBA in the future player. He hasn't been able to uplift the team. And again, that doesn't mean you start being like, oh, Scottie, he doesn't have the goods. Scottie has the goods. He's just not
Yeah.
using,
That's
he's
clear.
just focusing on other things right now. And it's making it a little bit harder on other guys. Everybody is in an uncomfortable position in this offense. Grady is in uncomfortable positions. Jakob's turnover percentage is crawling, like creeping up because he's in uncomfortable positions. Emmanuel quickly is. RJ is. Everybody has to try and like step above themselves because they're operating at like a little bit of a talent deficit. It's just like a lot. This is a lot.
Yeah. It's a tough part of like rebuilding also because you have ideas and ways that you want these players to grow and that they're all happening like simultaneously. Like the clear vision that they have for like Grady, for example, is that he's gonna be taking the toughest shots that this team has. He's gonna
And the
be
toughest checks.
yeah. he's
Like what the hell?
He's gonna be running around, darting around the offense, flying to the baseline and taking jumpers that way. That doesn't bode well for his true shooting percentage. There's gonna be games where he shoots 1 of 11, but in a playoff series, a guy like we compare like his movement to JJ Redick for
Sure.
some of the toughest baskets in that playoff series against the Raptors when neither team could create any possessions. The Sixers could call for split action for JJ, and it created either A, the Raptors had to be more aggressive, and that created easier shots for Joel, or B, he was able to score from three, which is the most important shot today. So when I look at the offense, it's like overall, like Scottie, I'm not concerned. Like it's clear that he's gonna be a max player, eventually make an All NBA team once they're really good. I think the how the rest of the season goes like depends on how much impact Emmanuel quickly has. Like one initiating and becoming the driver that they hope that he can be. You saw it when he played against the Nets. When he was able to be the driver, Scotty was able to be the all NBA finisher that he's able to be. And that's how he sleepwalks to 33 points because
Mhm.
there's another guy that is putting onus on the defense. Since that game, they're it hasn't been there. And obviously he's coming back from an injury, but he's gonna either A, like from his shooting ability, or B from a like from an actual physical driving perspective, has to be able to at least he doesn't have to push the boulder, but at least be the second guy that's helping Scotty along the way. So I'm super interested to see if that formation that's Messiah like really heralded actually can work.
Yeah. To your point about the JJ thing, I just looked it up. In a series where we're looking at like two of the best teams in the NBA that year,
Yeah.
and to me, one of the best defenses that has been crafted in the past 10, 15 years, the 2019 Raptors, the 76ers relied on JJ for basically like 14 points per game on 45, 40, 90 splits against that Raptors team. Who else was on that team? Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, Jimmy Butler. Getting 14 points per game and there's like 95 points to go around. Big numbers for JJ
Mm,
Redick and did so efficiently in a matchbox. The hope is that Grady can be a matchbox shooter in the future, and he's certainly being asked to be that right now. It's not going super well. He's had a
yeah.
tough time, but like, yeah, you're making guys do difficult things in the name of progression, in the name of development, and that doesn't absolve Darko of everything. It
Yeah.
doesn't absolve the team of everything because again, like a lot of we know what the fan base is talking about, which is why we are saying like, well, don't be so like it's okay that this is happening with Scotty because you want to quell some of that anxiety, right? We've quelled anxiety before. You want to quell it about players, but you know they like up and down. It happens. The thing I want to talk about next is the clutch stuff. It didn't go super well last night, actually. The Raptors ran like a one of my favorite plays that they run, Horns Chin Punch. They've ran it for years. And because they have these great wings, these big, powerful wings, OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes, it's a great way to get a post touch on a guard. You just come off of a chin screen, get a high entry point. There you go, bucket. Scotty scored 3 points out of that because he got a dunk and then he went to the line, split the pair. But the Raptors struggled offensively down the stretch. Why do they struggle in the clutch? Because of the overall limitations of their defense. The most important thing in the clutch, Darius Garland, Jesus, did he ever show it, is dynamic live dribble creation that creates movement in the defense and obviously shot making ability. The Raptors are very low on both of those, which means that they have to rely on the pass as they do during the season. This is why their assist rate is so high. This is why their pass percentage is so high. This is also why their turnover percentage is so high. In the clutch, their assist percentage drops 18% because teams you can't score off the slice screen, the wedge, the flex, like these little dip and dunks things are not
Yeah.
as available in the clutch because teams care more in the clutch fourth quarter than they do in the second quarter. It just is what it is. You don't get the same defense the whole game. They have to try and pass. They aren't able to create as many looks that way. They also drop from 34% shooting to 26% shooting. And a really terrible stat is Grady is apparently shooting 11% on clutch threes. Not a great vote in the like vote of confidence for our matchbox shooter, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
But basically, the Raptors don't have the requisite shot making and live dribble creation to dominate in the clutch. And all of their biggest weaknesses show up in the clutch, which is that they have to pass guys into buckets and they have to rely on shooting against teams that are more likely to, preserve their shell. They're failing at all of it. That's like the biggest motivation. And then the more shots you miss, the more transition you play, the less time you get to set up and be, cognizant of which matchups you're allowing on the other side. And then you have Grady Dick if he's out there shooting 11% on one side of the floor and then getting hunted on the other. And then, hey, you're losing minutes, brother. You're losing games.
It's tough. Like, um, they're
I'm glad you've joined me in the it's tough. That's tough. I finally have a brother in toughness.
they're so limited, like from a dribbling perspective. All of the guys work best off the catch or getting a deep catch like from the post, like in Scottie's perspective. RJ kind of had that, especially like last year. He was able to be a tone setter in that perspective and get the Raptors some of those buckets that they needed. But defenses just aren't moving for in any of the actions that the Raptors are designing. And similar to the offense discussion just before, they don't have that guy yet that is dangerous from a pull-up perspective, even from shooting. Quickly
Like
hasn't
he's
necessarily
he's a
shown that from
good
three.
pull-up shooter. It's
Yeah,
just like
an aggression thing.
it's one aggression, but it's also like a lot of quickly like his stats say he's a good pull-up shooter, and you look and a lot of is it like not against aggressive defense. Like he's not pulling up in a phone booth. He's
Yeah,
typically like early offense threes, like he's like, okay, it's a lazy second quarter pick and roll, throw ahead dribble, catch, hit. But like late in games, when there's a guard who's like, no, man, I'm like, I really don't want you to get that shot off. Quickly is not that quick a shooter. He has a slow load. He kind of really likes to settle into his legs. It's a bit of a push. It's not a high release. There's a lot of things that mitigate his ability to be like a rapid pull up guy. Because you go watch
yeah,
Donovan Mitchell, for example, who like, and D Mitch is way better at this than Garland is too. Garland is a in the legs, not super high release shooter, but Donovan Mitchell is like throw ahead. There's a guy breathing down my neck. There's a big like 3 inches in front of my face. I'm rising up. I'm launching and I'm hitting like that type of stuff.
it's
That's why D Mitch goes insane in the playoffs every year.
yeah. It takes you to another level. And he like even from the Raptors like pick and roll perspective, like the most dangerous like play type they have is the pass to Jakob. And that bodes well to like it just shows some of the limitations that they do have. Like when they run that late in games, defenses aren't moving. They're a lot of the time sitting on the push shot that Jakob has because they don't have guys that get to the rim off their initial burst or initial action. Darko typically has to manufacture that. And late in games against good teams, like you saw the Cavs, they got serious towards the end of the game. And the Raptors weren't able to manifest things. And Scottie's not always going to hit every difficult mid-range jumper.
Yeah,
It
he
just
he
makes it.
went he went 5 for 7 in the second
Yeah,
half. Like Scottie, as far as hitting the shots that he took, he did a pretty damn good job. He didn't create easy shots, which
yeah,
is you want guys to create easy shots, but as far as like hitting the shots you get, this guy did a pretty damn good job. He airballed at the end, and like, but that was the thing too, was that Scottie was severely limited in what he was able to create.
yeah.
He didn't get deep. Everybody knew where he was going. They sat on it. He had to throw something up. But and like we've seen that in the clutch many different times that Scottie likes to settle into that isolation. It hasn't gone super well yet, but them's the breaks. Like, look at this team. They won one game in the past month. if Scotty's gonna mess around and like do some of that, like I'm just seeing what happens, now is the time to do it. And like do nobody likes watching that necessarily. Like everybody would like it more if Scotty was averaging like 25 points per game and his shot diet was a little bit easier. That would be like a more fun watch. And then all the stands could argue his stats on Twitter against like Mobley, Cade, and Franz and all those guys. But that's not what's happening. However, if Scotty is like a guy who can do all these different things and a guy who, hey, I got all these reps in game of like looking for my shot late in the fourth quarter and I can hit this a lot, it's a pretty nice thing to settle into. Like
Yeah,
Pascal, he never he never got that as a Raptor. But
yeah,
then playing calmly and all those reps, he had the most efficient play in the playoffs. Like more than a Jokic post up, more than an Ant Edwards pick and roll, more than like any play type in the whole NBA. Pascal Siakam's post up was the most efficient in the NBA. And like, where did all those reps come from? The Raptors. It manifested on the Pacers, of course, but like, I mean, them's the breaks.
uh, like even in like the Pascal situation, like all of the younger players the Raptors drafted, like through the in that very like I'll call it a hot streak now because it seems insane, but like besides hot streak for like a decade, they played in such great environments and they got so many positive outcomes from the veterans on the team where you have a Kyle Lowry that is going to give you really easy shots and even the development that you have within those possessions, because even Pascal early on, he probably started at a point where no one was expecting him. He started way more games as a rookie than
He started his
anyone.
first two NBA games. They just put
Yeah,
him on the floor because they had an injury. Go
yeah.
figure.
No one expected him to play as much as he did. You're just in spots where you get more positive reinforcement just because you're in those environments, and you see a team like Houston. Alfred Sengun takes another leap because he has Fred VanVleet on his team. So the Raptors, I think, in theory, had some of that. Tried to at least. You have a guy like Kelly Olynyk, who's in the NBA been one of the better interior passers and connective pieces. He hasn't been very good. Bruce Brown's been injured for a long period of time, and the Knicks guys ideally should be helping creating more wins in terms of at least from an offensive perspective.
They should be,
But
yes.
yeah, but we haven't seen that. So it's difficult to expect at least like Scottie or even Grady because Grady we were getting star outcome for a long period of time, and a big reason why the offense was good at one point and winning games to consistently do that. Like when Pascal was never asked to consistently be good as a young player for a long period of time. So
Yeah.
I
So
think a big thing heading into next season is can you find 2 or 3 vets that can stick within the offense and execute what you want on defense and be the necessary outlet offensively to help with additional growth?
something interesting is so Pascal started his development path later in his life than Scotty did and
Yeah.
later in his career than Scotty did. Not only was Pascal in college, like he entered the league at 22 and a half years old. Scotty's 23 now in his fourth season. But Pascal, when he left New Mexico, was the highest volume mid-range shooter in college basketball. And when he got to the league, like look at year 2, long mid-range frequency in the third percentile for big men. Next year, even the year he won the chip, long mid-range, 19th percentile. 2% of his shots came in the long mid-range. By 2022-23, 17% of his shots come there. The Raptors and this developmental thing is like they didn't even let Pascal do what he was one of the best things he was best at
Yeah.
in college. Pascal, that he hit a championship winning shot, by the way, was a catch in the short roll where he didn't turn and fire. He put a dribble down, made Draymond come and get him, and went to a push shot. Like Pascal had to go and get his reps later and return to certain parts of his game. The Raptors currently, they don't have like they're doing hard things because they have to do hard things.
Yeah.
It's not like players are having to like occupy bit roles. Just like they need as much as they can get from every single player on the roster. And to your point, is Kelly making things super easy for other players? No. Is Bruce? No. Are any of the vets besides Jakob? Not really.
Yeah.
Does Scotty make things easier? Yes, to some degree. but he's also focusing on like a very isolated part of his own game right now. Everybody has to do really difficult things all the time. And so we don't get to see the little things as much, which is a lot of what props up players in the NBA and why players get to step into winning teams. The Raptors just don't have the talent to facilitate that. So a guy like Jacoby doesn't just get to come off of a screen and cut. They're like, no, run the pin down and like dribble 6 times and find a shot. And Grady, they're like, sprint 18 feet, dead into the corner, and fade and hit a shot on a bounce. Like, I just.
Like it's if you put Grady on, say, like the 22 team, and the large majority of his role probably would have been spotting up.
Yep.
His spot up numbers are really good. You head into the next season saying the Raptors have one of the best shooters in the league. I can't believe Masai did it again. I said that upon pick, but it looks different when you have guys that offer positive results. You even saw it yesterday. Like Chris Boucher had a good game, and it changed the entire landscape of how competitive you can be.
Yeah.
Just one 20-point game from
Yeah.
some guy other than barbecue.
Yeah. That's like, yeah, that's the thing is there a lot of teams have easy roles. Like,
Mm.
what if Dean Wade had to try and like put up like 18-5 as an initiator? And they're like, well, Dean, there's not a lot going on. Like, what if Darius Garland couldn't just decide to give you like 40-10? What if Darius was more limited? Well, then Karis LeVert doesn't get to have this cushy role.
Yep.
Ty Jerome doesn't get to, like, all these guys have to start doing way more. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And the Raptors are constantly in this position of just like, hey, brother, we need more. And they're like, well, how do you mean? And they're like, of everything. We need more rebounds. We need more assists. We need more shot making. We just need it all. And they're asking that of everybody. And it's tough, I think, to find role definition when
Mhm.
veterans don't adequately pad out the roster and the framework. And I think the Raptors struggle from that a little bit. They paid a guy like Kelly to provide role definition. He's not really giving it. Bruce, like, he came in, he's not giving it. Great GQ sports piece on him today. It's about how he dresses like a cowboy. It's not about how he plays basketball,
I
like
I like the cowboy gear. I'm
he's
not
the
gonna
yeah,
lie.
I no, I love the cowboy gear. I like Bruce the man.
Yeah.
He's not playing basketball. No. I like Bruce a lot, but we're just not getting it. And that's also why why a lot of people say Jakub is an important part of the team, because it's like, what the hell does this even look like if he's not there?
Yeah.
And we get a little piece of that by saying that, well, it doesn't look good with Kelly. It doesn't look good with Bruce. Chris is fun, but he's he's in the doghouse half the time and just like whatever. Tough, man.
Yeah, like
Uh
he's just gotten so many negative outcomes. It's insane from this
yeah,
team, but
this and all, like, it's tough for guys to thrive when everybody's been asking to play like above and outside of themselves.
yeah.
Nobody gets to be comfortable. And what that means probably is in the future, they got to learn a lot about guys. They got to learn it early and they get to make informed decisions. And hopefully, well, usually what teams will do is that they'll pay somebody to come in. And it's like,
Yeah.
this is your role. And we paid you this much money. You're coming into a locker room. These guys might feel like, this guy, that guy. And the coach says, this is this guy. This is what he does. Don't question it. When Paul Millsap came into Denver, like, there were a bunch of guys who were trying to like be that guy. And they're like, no, it's Paul. Be as good as Paul or start being better. And then you can like take possessions. Then you can do stuff. But the Raptors don't
Yeah.
have that now. It's just
It
everybody's doing stuff.
yeah, you need vets that do ancillary things like Memphis gets Steven Adams. Steven Adams is historically one of the better screeners. It changes the level that John Morant gets to. Fred
Mhm.
VanVleet does the same thing for Houston, and they flip the identity of that team, and now they're one of the best defensive teams in the league. I think they attempted to do this like with Kelly, with guys like that. It just like hasn't happened.
It turns out Kelly Olynyk is not Fred VanVleet or Steven Adams, although he gets paid like 3 times less than Fred and like
Yeah,
2 times as little as Steve. Like, the Raptors were kind of like, they're not all the way in.
yeah.
They haven't. They'll make that decision in the future, but like, they're not all the way into it now. Yeah. We kinda talked about Grady. We don't really have to do the Grady check-in. We've been talking negative stuff for an hour and 16, an hour and 15 minutes. That feels like a podcast, yeah?
Yeah, I think we did a good job.
Hopefully, this is like I think it's good to get this out there, even if it isn't our most popular podcast. I think for like faithful podcast listeners,
Yeah.
this is a good check-in and this is a good reference point for ourselves going forward. It's like, remember all those things we talked about? This is just a nice little like line of demarcation. Like, okay, this is what's bad. It's all out there. If anybody ever wants to revisit this to be like, nice, they improved. I think a lot of what we're saying in this, of course, there's some opinion, but a lot of this is objectively true. There's not much opinion here. There you go. Them's the breaks. Anything you want to say to the listeners before we get out of here, Trey?
Like I know a rebuild in theory is like very easy to go through, and like the Raptors felt like they mastered it for like 20 games, but like this was to be
Oh,
expected. You're gonna go a month where you get your teeth kicked in.
it
There's
might
gonna
be a
be another
couple, you
streak.
know?
There's gonna be another streak just like the beginning of the season where it looks like they're really scrappy. One of the young guys are popping off and looks like there's some like star potential. And it's like ebbs and flows throughout the season. It's gonna get better. The starters have been competitive for 2 games in a row. So
Yeah,
there's hope.
I need to see more from the starters. I'll be honest. I don't want the starters to be competitive. Like win the
It's been a
minutes.
rough month. It's been
Like
a rough month.
when I look at this, like and not to do the salary thing, and I won't, because Scottie makes like $12 million this year.
Yeah.
It's not a lot. Scottie's a great player.
Yeah.
Emmanuel Quickly, at the very least, like people I never thought, but people are like, he could be an all-star. Let's see it then. Like, come on. Like
Come on,
give
man.
me. Yeah. Like I want to see it on a rainy night in Stoke. And he like Emmanuel deserves grace because a
Yeah.
UCL is a pretty funky injury and like he hasn't had a stretch this season, and he'll find that in the latter half. RJ, like, I've loved so much of what he's done offensively. Pick it up defensively. Jakob, more or less fine. Grady, maybe for the starters to succeed, he has to like be a bench guy this year. He looks dog tired. Maybe it looks better after the All-Star break, but like if Jakob, if the four-man unit of Jakob, Scottie, RJ, and IQ can't win minutes and do it quite heavily, we got problems.
Yeah.
Like a bunch of stuff is moving around this team, but if those four guys, regardless of the coach, regardless of who the fifth is, if those four guys can't win minutes and do so handily, it's bad news. That means that this rebuild is probably longer than even those who like think like, oh, a couple of years, it could be longer than that unless they're able to pivot effectively. But like these guys have to be good. Emmanuel Quickly doesn't have to be an all-star. He has to be good. RJ doesn't have to be like an all-star. He has to be good. Scottie has to be an all-star.
Yeah.
Jakob has to be good. All these guys have to be good. We just haven't seen enough of it. Individually, there's fun stuff, but yeah, the team needs to be better. And the players are the most responsible for that. And not any one, but as a collective, come on, brother. Let's see
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
They have some games where we have winning opportunity. Like Detroit, they need to. If we get smoked by Detroit, then I'd be pretty concerned. Although they're
Is
playing
it
well,
more so like the name of Detroit than it is like they're 19-19
I've watched a lot of Detroit games this year. Like they just win
on
because they're
Tubi? Are
Cade's been good, but they win because they're scrappy and it's a lot of effort. Like Orlando, they won because there's effort and a good reason why Darko called up the team.
The
You
Raptors
don't
need a
get
Thompson twin. Oh, they need a Thompson twin on their roster.
just a grinder
Yeah, man.
guy who gets muddy, but like
Can't shoot a lick. Just an absolute bastard on the floor.
yeah, and they need more of those guys that like drive effort. Like even when Scottie is on, and it seems like Evan Mobley, like when
It's
they play each other,
inconsistent, with Scotty is
yeah,
the thing too, yeah.
It's tough, but they need more of those guys that, like, drive minutes. I thought Bruce was
Yeah,
gonna be one of those guys that
they
help,
don't
like
have that guy.
they don't.
They're like when you think about, let's say, I mean,
I guess
like it's
Davion. T
but Davion, well, actually, Davion is a little bit like that, maybe to his detriment a little bit. Like he walled off Darius Garland and then started clapping in his face mid possession. It's like, bro, just please wait till afterwards, because then Garland just rescreened and lost him, and it was like, what? You're such a good defender. Why are you clapping mid possession? Enough. This is nonsense. Like IQ, like doing a skip on the way back and the pass sailing over his head. It's like, stop it. What are you doing? Scottie, they've won one game in the past month. He's like an emote and all that kind of stuff. But live ball, he's like emoting in the corner. It's like, get back on defense, man. And like this isn't me being like old man yells at cloud. Players have fun and all that kind of stuff. But like Scottie does a lot of fun stuff during dead ball. But like live ball, like I'm not getting back on defense. I'm dancing. IQ Scottie, Davion clapping at the guy he's defending live ball. It's just like, guys, we won one game in a month. In a month, like, come on, brothers,
No,
let's lock in.
that Nets game felt like a nation was rebuilt. I felt
Yeah,
so good
dude.
after.
We did that podcast and we're like, yeah, all this stuff was good. It's been terrible. I hope it's good going forward. And then it wasn't, man. It was still bad. But we got a fun game against the Cavs. We'll see
Yeah.
what happens with Detroit though. On the last podcast we did, which nobody got to hear with our audio malfunction, you said the Raptors would lose by less than 10 to the Cavs.
I
This is pretty
did.
good. Do you have a prediction for Detroit then?
I'm predicting a 2-game winning streak heading into our next pod. 2-game winning streak.
Oh, I guess the Warriors are pretty
That's
injured,
what I'm
yeah?
saying. We could win both those games.
Look at the excitement in your voice at the thought of being 10 and 30 or whatever the hell. Yeah, we need a 2-game winning streak before Boston,
Yeah.
then Milwaukee, then we get a big break. Yeah, man. That's a podcast for sure.
Yeah.
We just kept talking. We just
It was
kept
good.
talking. You and I were like, when you climb, well, you don't know this as much, but like when you climb, like the first 30 minutes, like climbers take a really long time to warm up because it's like your tendons, not your muscles or whatever. And then by like you're an hour into it and you're just like, I'm so warm, I could climb anything. You and I think it takes like 35 minutes as podcast partners, and then we're there.
Yeah. I'm getting close. Yesterday's the first time I legit ran.
Really?
Yeah, I ran yesterday.
Wow. Oh, we have to climb this week with the
Yeah.
fellows, with S, with Josh, with myself, with you. A leg might come, and our one friend who shall not have his government name repeated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I felt like Forrest Gump. Literally, I was running. I was like, "Oh, this isn't that
Well,
painful."
and the braces came off. Wow. Yeah, that's great. All right, Trey, thank you very much for joining me for our second podcast of the week, which is really our first. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Whether you got into this, actually like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Yeah, exciting announcement in the next couple of weeks for the Pull Up Trey
Mhm.
podcast as well. All that good stuff. Thanks for listening. Whether you got into this in the morning or at night, have a blessed day and goodbye.